Thank you for joining me today. I am going to switch things up a bit for today's episode in honor of World Health Day to talk openly about my struggles with mental health. Mainly anxiety and depression are my experiences. My hope is from sharing a different side to me, to entrepreneurship, to being a woman, to being a wife, to being a mother, that your takeaway is that you fight. You fight for what you want in your life. You find it within you to fight for your dreams, your life, your vision, your mental health, your physical health. So here goes nothing. This is totally outside of the box for me. So let me first preface this by saying I am not a medical professional and nothing I am giving today is medical advice. I am just sharing my experiences and my truth. So if you or someone you know is struggling with mental health or hurting, I highly encourage you to take 5 seconds of strength and courage to ask for help. I have included in the comments a note for the suicide help prevention line. You can do so anonymously, whether you're having suicidal thoughts or not. Please reach out and ask for help if you're struggling. With that being said, my first experience with depression was back in 2012 after a late-term miscarriage. So I was 16 weeks pregnant with our first child, and we went to our 4-month appointment where there was no heartbeat. Now, we had spent a year trying to get pregnant, and we're doing fertility testing to see if there was anything wrong, and during that was when we got pregnant. And instantly, my life changed the second I had a positive pregnancy test. And I instantly became a mother in that moment the second I saw a positive pregnancy test. Now, it is around 11 weeks that we were notified that there might be an issue with the baby, there might not, and we went through a lot of extensive testing but had no answers. And so we were not expecting the loss of our daughter. Her name was Kaya. And it was through that I found out on a Monday that she had passed. And it wasn't until Friday that we had the surgery to remove her. So for 5 days, I had to walk around, not to be too morbid, but feeling like a coffin. And I could tell that I was holding back something, the floodgates. I just didn't let myself get to that point until after she was removed from me. And that was the first weekend that I had my very first panic attack. Now, I've had anxiety for all of my adult life. I just did not know it was anxiety. I just thought it was how life was and my experience of it. I didn't have the name anxiety until I started having more frequent panic attacks after the miscarriage. So within the week after the miscarriage procedure, I went in for my checkup and I told my doctor, I'm not okay. I was crying constantly. My poor husband was just like, there was just a heaping mess of a woman left as his wife. And we eventually got me a great therapist who specialized in maternal mental health to help me walk down that path of pregnancy loss, which is very different than normal loss and grieving, where people have an experience with another person. You can kind of share that grief. Pregnancy loss is a little more isolated to just inner family, because most people don't even know that there's a miscarriage. The public doesn't usually know. It's not like they have experiences with this person that they can, reflect fondly on. So it was a whole different story to navigate. Shortly thereafter, we had a health scare with me where I had an ovarian cyst that they thought might have been cancerous. So I had to have a surgery to remove that. Thank the Lord that it was benign and there was no cancer. But shortly after that, my husband then deployed for 8 months to the Middle East. So this was a lot going on in a very short time frame. While I was getting therapy, I didn't realize what was happening was I was slipping into depression. It was after, my miscarriage was in June. And in November is right around Thanksgiving time, my sister-in-law, who is a doctor, I was the one who actually pointed out to me to my mom, that she thought I was depressed. I was isolating myself. I wasn't having suicidal thoughts, but I was having thoughts of hurting myself. I was so desperate for my husband to come back to help support me while he was going through his own grief all the way across the world, that I didn't realize my experiences were symptomatic of depression. So once this was pointed out to me, for me, I didn't really care about my depression. I was grieving, but what I saw was what it was doing to my family, and that's when I asked for help to get on medication. So that was the first time that I had full-blown depression and got on medication for it. And medication for me was the right choice. It also raised the bottom a little bit, so I wasn't having as significant lows. For anxiety is an ongoing thing for me that I struggle with. It can make me feel helpless for sure. Depression and anxiety oftentimes can be taken really lightly or not talked about openly, but yet a lot of people struggle with it. But what depression and anxiety look like for me is I start to get a little obsessive about work. Okay, a lot obsessive about work. I am trying to control things that are really not within my control, but I have to feel like there's some means of controlling things. So I try to get very controlling. I'm moody. I'm irritable. I don't sleep. Insomnia is a huge trigger for me to know that I'm kind of going down a bad mental health path. I start blaming my circumstances or other people. I feel out of control, and mainly I want to run away or escape. That's kind of my default. When I'm really stressed or I'm starting to get depressed, I want to run away. So I also make terrible health choices as far as physical, like the food, and I'm not working out, and I'm not taking care of myself, and I'm neglecting myself. Now, after a couple of bouts of depression and frequent, almost daily experiences with anxiety, I can recognize when those things are happening now, and especially because my therapist has taught me what to look out for. So that has been a benefit to me for the therapy to understand coping mechanisms with it. I also, oftentimes we feel like anxiety is we start to feel like it's out of our control, that we don't have a say in how our life is run. We don't have a choice in our circumstances. We start to play the victim, and we start feeling paralyzed to move our lives forward. And your circumstances may feel insurmountable. But what I want to share with my experience is that you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts and mine come and go, and sometimes I feel like I don't have control of them. But when anxious thoughts come in, and sometimes they're very deep and dark, I either let them come in and then I let them go, and I just sit with it until they go, or I distract myself, do breathing exercises, work on coping mechanisms to get those thoughts out of my head and to focus on something positive. Because I fear that if I let myself go down a bad path with those thoughts, that I'm never going to be able to get back out of it. I am also not what other people think of me. Being a perfectionist, which stems from a lot of fear of how I'm perceived, means that I will oftentimes stay paralyzed and not move forward in my life or make a decision or commit to a decision or commit to a path because I'm afraid of what other people are going to think of me. But it's my life, it's my experience. I've kind of run into this a lot with one-on-one coaching, saying no to one-on-one coaching more because it's not what the business that I want. I don't want to be appointment only. That's a big reason why I got out of lashing and moved into the Lashpreneur, because it's hard for me to say no, and I know I can help people, and I know they need one-on-one help, but I have to focus on what's important to me. It's not that I'm saying no to helping them. It's just a lot of times I want to focus on helping a lot of people and not just one, but that requires me to say no. Being able to say no, especially when I'm struggling personally, is my greatest gift, is my greatest strength right now. I have a choice, and it may not be the most perfect of choices that's going to help me out of my struggle, but I can choose to ask for help. I can choose to confide in friends and family. I can choose to research and invest in myself to understand my own mental health, to understand how to control my thoughts or how to cope with anxiety or depression. I can choose to stay stuck. I can choose to stay miserable. I can choose to continue to experience life miserably and unhappy, or I can choose to fight. And you have those same choices as well. My current situation I am back in a depression mode, which I'm not, this is where it feels uncomfortable and vulnerable. So about 2 months ago, my husband was diagnosed with PTSD. This is something he's been living with for a very long time. We just didn't know it was PTSD. Now that the diagnosis has come into play, we've started to kind of uncover what his triggers are and kind of the history behind it. For us, a lot of his triggers comes around chaos and with our children and the noise level of our children. It is the most heartbreaking thing to have your children be a trigger for you and your mental health. It has been horrible to watch as a wife, his struggle with that and the relationship, and both ours and with his kids. So we decided as a family, the best thing we could do to fight for our family was to have the kids and I move in with my parents so that my husband could go through a very intensive time of therapy without being, to be able to control when he's exposed to triggers, when he's in a good spot, and it's not detrimental to everyone else. So this has meant my kids and I have moved back in with my parents. Yay, I'm in my mid-30s living with mom and dad. And they, during this time, have sold my childhood home, the childhood home that I've known for 30 some odd years. And they are now moving what will be an hour away from where my husband and our home is. So this has been a huge transition in our life. It's scary. The first week I moved out, I was not okay. I went through an insanely hard time where I wasn't sleeping. I was obsessive about work. I felt like I was out of control of things and I was trying to control everything. My kids weren't sleeping. And it got to the point where my behaviors were becoming destructive to everyone around. And I knew I had to provide stability above all else to my kids. Again, it wasn't about trying to save myself. It was seeing the effect of depression sneaking in on my family. And so I immediately scheduled myself weekly therapy sessions through the end of the year. I am back on antidepressants and I have anxiety medication as needed because those are the ways that I fight for my family, for my health, for my life, for my dreams. So all of this to say is I'm not settling for what feels good now. I have a very clear perspective that I am doing everything I possibly can to move my family forward, which means that the business side of things is pulling back, which means that the things that I wanted to do in my business at this point, I have to pull back on. It means I've gotten very simplified in my business, which actually has become a beautiful thing because my stress level with the business has gone way down because I am not saying yes as often. This means that I'm saying no a lot to things that I want to do, but know that it's just not the right time and season in my life. The biggest benefit for me in uncovering anxiety and giving anxiety a name is that it took the permanency of it out of my head. It meant that anxiety is something I experience. It's not who I am. It is not permanent in my head that I'm going to feel anxious all the time or that I'm going to have these anxious thoughts all the time. I know it's something that comes in and it will leave at some point. Same with my circumstances. I know my family and I are not going to live in this situation forever. This is our Hail Mary to keep our family together, to get my husband the help he needs, to get me the help that I need with my children. This is a short-term thing. It may be a year. We don't know how long it's going to be. That's awesome because I'm out of control of it. But I'm looking at the big picture. I'm not looking at the temporary circumstance, which all circumstances are temporary. Life won't always be this way, right? Life won't always be a struggle. There is hope. There is always hope, and there's always something worth fighting for. So I encourage you to say no more often. I encourage you to not always be striving for a 50-50 balance with work and life. It doesn't exist. I give the analogy of a pendulum. Think of a grandfather clock swinging back and forth. Sometimes in life, you're going to be in a season where it's very heavy personal life focused. If you get pregnant and you're just in the middle of growing your business, hi, that was me last year or 2 years ago, then you have to focus on being a little more personal life heavy and business has to take a back seat. It won't always be that way. Your kids won't always need you as much as they need you when they're young. They'll go to school and then you'll have more time to devote to your business. I'm in a season now where I was just business heavy and now I'm back into personal life heavy. And I'm okay because I know it won't be like this always. So don't think that everybody's got work-life balance figured out. It's one or the other. And it's okay to not be okay. Let me say that again. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to sit in the self-care section at the Barnes & Noble and read Tony Robbins or Mel Robbins or anybody else who you think is going to give you tips and tools to help you out of it. It's okay to tell your doctor you're not okay, that you need medication, that you need therapy. There is no stigma. There is no amount of bashing your head against a wall harder in order to try and make something happen for your life. You have to keep fighting for it. So in honor of World Health Day, I wanted to share with you that I am and have been in therapy for 6 years with an amazing therapist, that I am currently on antidepressants and anxiety medication as needed, that I have a husband with PTSD, that my dog was just diagnosed with terminal cancer, that I struggle a little less now that I'm on medication and have good support in my daily life with anxiety, that I experience depression, and I pour myself unhealthily into work on occasion. My life is messy, it's complicated, overwhelming, and full of gray, and I'm a black and white kind of girl. And I am fighting every day for my mental and physical health, for my business, for my dreams. My hope is for you today that you fight too. Your life, your dreams, your family, your future are worth experiencing to the fullest and fighting like hell for. Please don't stop fighting for it. I encourage you to tag or share this with a friend who you think might need to hear this. And thank you for joining me today. Have a good one.